I see that the REDD agenda in Brazil has progressed immensely over the last 5 or 6 years. There is a growing and large support for the concept of REDD, which did not exist not too long ago. And I see that both in governmental agencies and in the civil society. So I'm very optimistic that the initiatives that are taking place in Brazil will eventually develop into a broader and bigger set of activities. We don't have a law at the federal level that deals with the concept of payment for environmental services and deals with carbon so that you can have contracts and programs developed under such a framework. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges. Brazil is a very heterogeneous country, so the reality of the Bolsa Floresta program, for example, does not apply to other areas of the Amazon which are dominated by soybean commercial agriculture or beef production. So one has to design a flexible approach that deals with the different landscapes within the Amazon and also the reality of other biomes. We have a huge area of savanna, which we call Cerrado. And then we have the Atlantic rainforest. And then we have the drylands of the Caatinga. So there are many different settings. So one of the challenges is to design a system of REDD that is able to deal with all these different situations and conditions of Brazil. Last year we had a very interesting progress. We have a law basically drafted within the lower chamber of our Congress. We have now the discussion to finalize the approval of that, and then it will go to the Senate. So I'm optimistic that we have a chance within this year to have it passed in the Congress. That's one of the issues of the law, the federal law. What are the roles of the federal government, the state and municipal government, and the private sector? And this law, which is being drafted, is aimed at recognizing an important role of the states, because states in Brazil have a lot of mandate on forests, but it's also something that has to do with how you divide benefits. The whole concept of benefit sharing is one that is a key element for success of REDD, not only in Brazil, but I think throughout the world. The federal law is setting up the concepts and the overarching frameworks. A lot of the regulations will have to be done either by the governmental agencies at the federal level or by the states. And I think that in order to have an adequate benefit sharing mechanism, we have to have a very flexible one that is able to deal with all the realities of Brazil. I think there is a need to change, and this change is taking place in terms of how to view sovereignty and the Amazon. And I think we should look at one particular process in history, which was the task force organized by governors of Amazonas state, which report to President Lula and former Minister Dilma at the time. This was in 2009. And the message was a change in paradigm. The message was that protecting the forest was not something only in the interest of the international community, but was something in the interest of Brazil. And I happen to be the coordinator of the technical component of this task force. And when we made the presentation to President Lula, and all ministers and all governors were in this meeting, and their reaction was very positive to a very simple message, that forests in the Amazon provide services to the rest of Brazil, especially through water cycling. So rain that we have in other parts of Brazil is significantly related to the Amazon. And this is important for agricultural production, which is a very important component of Brazilian economy. It's very essential to energy production because we're mostly hydro-based in terms of our electricity grid. And in terms of urban consumption, 70% of the water used in urban areas is captured from rivers. So on the basis of this rationale, the conclusions of the task force sent a very strong message through all levels of government saying, well, we should think of this as a Brazilian agenda in Brazilian interest, which also happens to be in line with the interests of other countries and the rest of the world. But it's not something that we should be concerned. So if there is a mechanism such as REDD that promotes forest conservation, this is not something which is preventing Brazil from developing, which used to be the old view. So I see a very important change in paradigms taking place in Brazil. And of course, this is not done yet, it's a process. But I see that this is becoming the mainstream thinking. Yeah, there is still a lot of noise in the media whenever there is something with an international company or an individual that buys land in the Amazon, and this is seen as an invasion. So there is a lot of that. People take cases out of context, and this becomes an issue in the Brazilian media. But I think, and also in the Brazilian Congress. But this is becoming less and less important. In my previous role as State Secretary of Environment, one of the things that became very clear to me is a common mistake throughout Latin America of putting an overemphasis on monitoring and law enforcement and less of an emphasis on education. So I think the biggest challenge to enforce legislation is to make people aware. It's interesting to see that in most public schools, forest management is not dealt with. In most public schools, fisheries management is not a component of the classroom. So you cannot expect a person who is largely illiterate, who has had no argument about management of natural resources, to comply to a law that he or she cannot read and doesn't have access to it. So I think the biggest challenge that we have is to focus on education. Because in general, and contrary to what most people think, people in the rainforest are honest. And they are not willing to break the law unless they have no options. So I think if we give them the options, first to understand the law, and second to understand the logic of the law, and third to learn about alternatives. For example, now we are selling pirarucu, which is a large fish coming from managed lakes. And they used to be valued at close to R$2 per kilo. Now they're being sold at about close to R$6 per kilo. So management makes sense in economic terms to them. And so if we explain what is the science behind management of fisheries and show that they can earn more by management, then we can win the game. The same goes for Brazil nuts. You can sell timber of Brazil nuts illegally and make money, short-term money. And people do that all the time. But if you can show that they can make more money by harvesting the nuts, they're not stupid. To me, this is a very important message, to realize that deforestation is not a result of stupidity or irrationality or ignorance. People don't deforest because they're stupid. They deforest because they're smart. And they deforest because of a logic, an economic logic. So we have to change that economic equation. So it's not an issue of law enforcement. It's an issue of economics and education. Of course, you have to have law enforcement. But this is, in my view, a secondary thing. We have to put first education and economics. I think we should not look at REDD as if it was a panacea, as something that would do all for the forest and for the people. We have to look at REDD as one mechanism that is a part of a series of others that will or will not be able to save the forests. I'm very optimistic that REDD can make a very significant contribution. Not only REDD thinking in international terms from country to countries, but also REDD within Brazil. Brazilian states in the most industrialized parts of Brazil, such as São Paulo, have passed regulations on caps and trade. So we may see in the near future the development of a cap and trade system within Brazil. So I think this is something quite unique of Brazil, because in a way Brazil has both ends within a single country. You have a very urban, very industrial and relatively wealthy society in São Paulo and Rio and other large cities, and then an extremely underdeveloped rainforest areas such as the interior of the state of Amazonas. So I think that we may see something quite unique here, and not only in terms of financing of REDD in practice, but also in terms of having something which is a working model that is designed for domestic use within Brazil, but then that can be of relevance when we have the international framework in place. Bolsa Floresta is a mechanism to change an old dream and make that come true. And the dream was to have forests being valued for the services they provide. And this is something which is not new. In Amazonas state, there was a professor, Professor Benchimol, in 1950, who said that forests of the Amazon provided a service to the rest of the world, and people who live in the forest should be compensated for that. So it has long roots. When we designed this program in 2007, this was an opportunity we saw to contribute both to the international debate, showing that REDD is doable, is something that can happen on the ground, and also was something to create a short-term result for the Amazon society, which was betting on this idea of changing the paradigm of development since 2003. So we had to provide something which was visible and which was not dependent on the UNFCCC process, which, as we all know, has taken much more time than it should, and it will probably take even more time than we would like to. So the idea was to have something that could speak to the international community, saying, well, this is doable, and also could speak to the Amazon society, saying, well, this is a sample of what we would like to have in a bigger scale in the future. Payment for environmental services as cash is just one component. So I see REDD in the Amazon as having 4 components. And this is how we designed the Bolsa Floresta. One is cash payment, but that's not the most important one. The reason for having cash payment is to build trust. Because people are very frustrated for promises that have not been fulfilled, especially those in the very middle of the forest. The second component, income generation. Instead of giving cash out, we invest in making forests worth more standing and cut. Another component is that you cannot have cash and income increase without having good health. People have to have good drinking water, access to health services, and at the same time you cannot expect them to be on board of a challenge which has global significance and so on without having appropriate education. So that's a Bolsa Floresta Social, the social component. And you cannot have these things all working without having empowerment. We have to empower the associations, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones who will be pressing everybody, federal government, state government, municipal government, to do things that they should be doing. So that's where the Bolsa Floresta Association comes in. So I see these 4 components as components that can be of general use, not only throughout the Amazon, but throughout the world. We have received a number of visitors from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, from Indonesia, who responded to me saying, well, we see that this approach that you have designed makes sense to us. Maybe the numbers will be different, but the concept of having a holistic approach makes sense. So for me, REDD has to have this holistic approach. Otherwise, it will not change the course of history. It is scalable and is applicable to other parts of Brazil and other countries. We have had this input for a number of people who have visited us. Now the state of Acre in Brazil is doing something similar. The state of Minas Gerais in southern Brazil is also doing something similar to the Bolsa Floresta. There are several other states of Brazil doing something inspired by the Bolsa Floresta. So I think that this is already taking place. The impacts of Bolsa Floresta have to be seen in several fronts, because as we have discussed, this is a program that has several components. So we did do a survey recently in the first reserve, which is Wotumam, and asked people if life had improved since the Bolsa Floresta began, and 68% said yes. We asked them if they expect life to be better in the upcoming years as a result of the Bolsa Floresta, and 82% said yes. So that's people's perception. We did a survey also on income, and income had significantly increased as a result of many other things rather than the cash payment. In terms of forest fires, this was done by using the Brazilian National Satellite Center. Brazil has a very sophisticated agency to monitor both deforestation and forest fires. And there's a very significant difference between forest fires in the areas protected by the Bolsa Floresta, and in the other protected areas which do not have the Bolsa Floresta yet. So that's measured already, and it's in the website. In terms of deforestation, we also observed a small reduction of deforestation within the Bolsa Floresta compared to other areas which do not have the Bolsa Floresta. So I see results already, especially in those which started now already 3 years ago. But I think that it's only fair and more precise to look at concrete results over long periods of time. I think that 5 to 10 years is probably a period where we will have a more concrete assessment of the results. But to be honest, when I go to the field and talk to people, I see that change has already been made because of people's thinking. And I think once you earn consciousness, once you earn people's awareness towards these other things and make them consistent with their dreams of improving their lives, I think it's just a question of time. Looking at the future of REDD, not only in Brazil but in the international arena, I think it's very important to place a great emphasis on exchanging lessons learned within developing countries. I think South-South cooperation is a concept that is very important, and particularly on REDD, because REDD speaks so much to the development agenda that is very different from the developed and industrialized world. So instead of getting aid or assistance, technical assistance from the industrialized world, I think developing countries should put a greater emphasis on exchanging lessons and technologies with the financial support of the developed world. So I think there's a very interesting opportunity to change the old pattern of North-South technical exchange, rather than doing a triangular approach. The North financing and the South providing experiences to each other to improve the efficacy and efficiency of REDD. I'm convinced that it will have more impacts, and I speak that on the basis of our experience. We have received now more than 30 countries visiting the Bolsa Floresta, and some of them very high-level ministers, and all of them said at the end of their stay with us in Amazonas that what they saw there had a lot of applicability to their realities. So I think this is what gives me confidence to say that we should change the concept of North-South technical assistance to a more South-South one.